Hi, welcome back to another episode of Cold Stream Rod Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. In this week's video, we're working on 32 Roadsters, specifically Brenda's Roadster. One thing I didn't mention before was that this particular frame, it didn't come with any of the bolt holes for the body drilled and tapped. Now, I've bought the frames this way before myself. You can buy a Brookfield Roadster frame with the front, center, and rear brackets on it. And then what they do, they actually weld bungs up underneath like little metal plates. So what you have to do is lay out where all the holes are and then drill and tap your own holes for the frame. So I've done it before. I basically have a 32 Roadster frame. You can download it from, I think it's Westcott's Auto Restyling. They still make fiberglass Roadster bodies, but on their website they got frames, 32s, Model A's, 35 to 40s, but they've got the frame diagrams all laid out with all the dimensions on them. I mean, I could also go off of an original frame here or another one in the garage, but I'm going to use basically that drawing to lay out where all the holes are. All I did right now, I've laid out some masking tape. I've got a T-square set up right over where the firewall bolt holes are. If those firewall bolt holes were the ones that hold the cowl weren't there, I can still measure off the front of the cross member and find them. But in this particular case, we have those. That's the reference point for all the other bolt holes. So I started laying them out in pencil here, and then I basically have to, from the center line out, I have to measure the width. So we'll drill and tap all of those. I'm still waiting on a T or something, I think, to do the brake lines on the front. As soon as that comes in, we'll jump on that. And then for the Camera Ladies Roadster, still going with that same theme of preparing the bodies or getting everything done, getting ready to get them epoxy primed before the cold weather hits. I'm going to refit the rear deck lid. Now the deck lid did fit before, but one thing I didn't do was I didn't have a set of adjusters. With the International Roadster, I took the original adjusters off there. The only difference here is that hole is worn out quite a bit. I'm going to have to build those up before I reuse those on the International Roadster. But I'm going to put those in the top of the deck lid here so that we'll have those adjusters. And then I went online and I bought a handle and a latch. So we've got those. I've already got the latch, or the catch, I guess, that the latch hooks into. I made one of those up before when I did the 5 windows. I'll show you that later. But that whole thing, we'll get that all fitted, handle in place, and the latching and catching and everything. And then I guess whatever else we can get onto this week on 32 Roadsters. So I went ahead and drilled and tapped all the body mount holes. I didn't videotape it because it's really not that exciting. Just drilling the holes and tapping them by hand, but they're all in right now, with the exception of the last two that go back here by the gas tank. The one thing I have found is when I go off of the drawing, which is kind of messed up there, you can't see it. I'll take a picture of a good one and we'll insert it. Basically, it puts the hole at 17¼ inches, right there, 17¼ inches from the back. What I've found is that when I put the bodies on, it's usually in the 18-inch range. So what I've been doing for all of these that I've worked on is I'll wait and I'm going to put the body. The body's going to come with the holes pre-drilled into it because it's a Brookfield assembled 32 Ford Roadster body. And what we'll do is we'll actually drill down through the trunk and we'll put those holes in the right places. That's another thing you could have done if you had a 32 Ford with all of the holes drilled into it, the subframe. So long as you line the body up relative to the firewall bolts, you could have just drilled the holes down through the body into the frame. But right now, we have these measurements. The body is coming, so I'll get all of them drilled and we're good to go. Just going to move on now. I'm going to do a little bit of brake line work. All of the brake lines are now done on Brenda's Roadster's chassis. I didn't do any time lapse on this because I've covered making brake lines quite a few times before, but I'm just going to go over what we put on. We have flex lines going here, going up across the front cross member. We then come out to a T. The T is going over into the other flex line, going into the driver's side. Because we have disc brakes on the front, there's a 2-pound residual valve in line. Then we have the brake switch. and that will then go into the rearmost port of the master cylinder. And then coming out of the master cylinder and the front port goes along, because we have this drum brakes in the back. We have a 10-pound residual valve here, which then goes to the proportioning valve, comes all the way up to the top there onto a flex line, and then there is a T actually on the axle with lines going to each side. Now, I mean, that's pretty much a standard hot rod, street rod kind of braking system. You can go on Speedway's website and you can download a diagram which is exactly what I just described. I also, like I've mentioned in the other videos when we've done brake lines and stuff, I've got a Eastwood flaring tool to make my brake lines. It's a really simple setup, and again, I've gone through it before, but it's basically 3 steps. You'll put your line in. You start with op 0, which basically pushes your brake line until it's flush. Then you do op number 1, and you create the bubble. And then op number 2, which makes the double flare onto it. And like I said previously, the most critical thing is that when you cut these lines, especially if you, I don't know if you can focus onto it, that end of that line there, when you cut it with one of these cutters, it's not going to be flat. So what you have to do is file that perfectly flat, and then just take a tiny little file, take the burrs out and make it just nice and flat and perpendicular. And then with this Eastwood tool or one like it, you can make a double flare in a heartbeat. It's pretty simple, and you know, I mean, you get the odd one that leaks sometimes, but that's usually just because I haven't tightened it enough. But sometimes I'll do a whole chassis and not one of them will leak even after putting them in. So that's the good thing. Next up, I'll have to get the camera lady out here to help me charge the system up and bleed all the brakes out. And then we're on to the next task. Next up is working on the camera lady's deck lid. I fitted the deck lid before, opens and closes, it's square and all that kind of stuff. But one thing I never did, even when we first started doing it, because I actually didn't know you had to do this, or at least they came stock this way. But there's actually adjusters that go up there with the hinge pin. And all you 32 Ford guys, you know this already. I think the Model A's have it as well. So what it is, it's like a mechanism here that this is the pivot point here. And then there's an oval hole here. So what it allows you to do is if you loosen this nut off and tip this up and down, it'll adjust the location of the hinge pin in the trunk. So the trunk or the boot lid, trunk lid, whatever you want to call it, will come up or down and adjust relative to the body lines. So on the outside, what happens is that, if you can see it right there, the hole in the sheet metal is actually larger than the hole in the adjuster. So you've got that room to move it up and down. So I've got both of those in. Couldn't find an American style screws, machine screws, so I had to go with the Canadian Robertson ones, but hey, they still work. If you don't like them, you can also just take a mini grinder and grind a little slot into them if you want, but I have the screwdrivers for it. They work. It's all good. Now on the latch itself, this has happened to me several times before. I've bought deck lid latches and they're too big. Too big as in like too thick. So I don't know if you can see it here or not. So there's like a column or a stack here that comes out from the hinge mechanism itself. So what happens, I think, is what they are always sending us ones for a rumble lid. So for the rumble mechanism, which actually goes up on the opposite side, it would go up here. It's actually physically much thicker. So all you have to do is actually this little column here that pushes up. You've got I wish I would have taken a picture of the thing before I put it in there, but you basically have to cut it off so it'll then sandwich in between this narrower section. And then you've got to tweak the holes and everything else. I think this was actually a good inner deck lid, but I still had to open up this square so that the little finger will come out. Yeah, so as you can see, it's still pretty tight. I'll probably take the file and go add a little bit more. And then on the inside here, had to open that hole up a little so that the the actually door handle or the lid handle, deck lid handle will come through. So that's all done right now. We did have a pop-up mechanism that was already on there. The next thing I have to do here is the actual catch that goes on the bottom. Now, I was fortunate enough to get a hold of an original, so I made a pattern. I'm gonna have to tweak this a little bit because it's actually got to go down a little bit more. So I think the drip rail here, I'm gonna undo the screws and just push it forward. So I'm gonna carry on putting that in. We'll get her all in. And then I'm really hoping that by the end of this episode, I'm going to start epoxy priming one of these two bodies or getting ready to do it. So we're really pushing to have this done soon while the weather is still holding out for us. There's a deck lid back on the Camera Ladies Roadster. Everything went on with the hinges perfect. They were in the right spot. Wasn't too worried about that. You can see up inside there, it's going to echo. There's the two bolts, and then you can see the pin in the back where it came through the side of the support there. It doesn't take much to get them in a row. It's basically a threaded pin that goes through there into the hole that it hinges on. And also the trunk lid support, put that back on. That was already on there before. And then, like I said, the catch here. Now, I did have to adjust the catch a few times, bend it or whatever, and it basically just, I'm gonna put a nut and a bolt here and replace that self-tapping screw, but for the time being, I just wanted to put it in with small screws to make sure it fit right. And then up top there, the one thing with the Vintique's handle, this thread here was full of chrome, so it took quite a bit to get on nut onto it. Now what I'll have to do is cut this off at probably when we finish, after we paint it, and then put like a nylon locking nut here with a washer, because if you tighten this too much, then it's too hard to turn. But right now, I don't know if I can do that with the camera here or not, but I'll try and not slam it. Oh, right there. So everything kind of latches really good, and we're good to go for now. Any other kind of adjustment I'd need to make, I mean, during the painting process and during the bodywork process and stuff like that, once I get some epoxy primer on it, more than likely any defects should show up when it's shiny, and we'll try and tackle all of those. Over on the International Roadster, what we're going to do now is it's the boring part really. So what I've got to do is go over the whole body with either wire wheel, flapper disc, or one of those, I'm not sure, forget what you call it. We've got a machine over here that's right there. This one is an Eastwood one, but basically it's got the abrasive wheel onto it here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use whatever it takes to get the rust off. I've just tried using the wire wheel on the original metal. It was pretty good at getting stuff off, but then when I used the wire wheel over on the newer metal, it wasn't so effective. You can see here, so more than likely I'll have to get the flapper wheel out and get that stuff off. But the next thing we're going to do is we're going to prep the metal, take the firewall off, and get the body off, and then hopefully before the end of this video, we'll epoxy prime it, or at the very least, we'll have it ready to epoxy prime at the end of this video. So we're making lots of progress here, getting the International Roadster all cleaned down and getting it ready to put the epoxy primer on it. So far, I've got all the outside done, probably 98%. I'm going to go back over it again in case I missed something. I've been using all different kinds of things to basically get the metal back down to bare. Mostly on the new metal, what I found the best thing to use to clean it off was this Eastwood tool that we've got. And again, there's no-name ones out there, and it's like a Scotch-Brite material. I've been using the more aggressive one here, which you can get off of Amazon or eBay or whatever. And you can go buy the real deal one from Eastwood or whatever, but I found this one here I got off Amazon worked really well. It's continuing to work really well. Most of the old metal stuff that I had sandblasted previously, and had some surface rust on. Actually responded much better to using the different types of wire wheels on the mini grinder. I put one on the drill, and then in tight spots I'm even going inside and just using like a little kind of sander. But basically you got to use whatever you can to kind of just get the metal down to bare, you know, getting into these little cracks and crevices. So what I want to do is have this thing ready in the next day, preferably tomorrow, worst case the next day. We'll get everything, all the metal prep cleaned and then wiped down with some solvent. I'm going to get the body off. I'm going to tip it up one way or the other. The first thing we'll do is we're going to get epoxy primer on the bottom of it, wait for that to dry, and then flip it back down and then epoxy prime the rest of the body. So making some serious progress here. I'm really hoping to have some epoxy primer on this before the end of the video, but this is the process. You got to get the metal down clean. Well, the weather was good today, and I managed to get everything all cleaned up and actually get some epoxy priming done. The ideal scenario would have been to be able to stand this completely up or put it on a rotisserie and tip it over, but unfortunately neither of which I could really do in the limited space I have. So what I did, I tipped it up here. It's resting on the floor there. I was able to spray most of the body, and then the most important thing first was that I wanted to get the underside of the floor epoxy primed. So I've got all of it done except for right down there by the floor. I didn't want to spray anything near the floor because I was going to kick up more dust. I cleaned everything up really good and wet the floor down before I started, but it's all dried up now. So what we're going to do, I am going to put this on some sawhorses and level it up so that it's up off of the ground. And then what I'll be able to then do is I'll be able to open the doors up or take the doors off and then finish painting the inside of the doors as well. So we're getting there. Hopefully we'll have this done before the end of the video. We're really trying hard. It will be cool if it gets this far, but stay tuned. There's the body up on the stands now. I don't have a whole lot left to do. Just basically have to get the places I couldn't reach from having the body tilted up like it was. Most important thing was to get the underneath done. We can do the top quite easily, but the top of the cowl, the inside of the doors, the rear lower deck lid's got to be done. And then of course I've got to spray up underneath here. There's one section of the floor I couldn't get to. So I didn't mention what I was using. My brother-in-law runs a auto body shop. He recommended me use this stuff here about 10 years ago. Delfleet Essentials epoxy primer. It's a 2-1-1 mixture. Works great, really forgiving for amateur and intermediate sprayers like myself. I use the 3M PPS cup system just because it's so simple. Essentially, you take the cup, you put a liner into it, you fill it, everything's marked on the inside of this cup. The liners, usually with this kit, I think, so there is a, here's a liner. You put that in, you can see, you can make your mixture. Then these caps go on top of it, and then you basically take your gun after you've mixed it up. Oops, lacquer thinner in that, but that's okay. This is, that cup there has already been used. Put it in, twist it in place, and then your gun's ready to go. As far as guns go, I've got some good guns for doing paint and clear. I've got like a SATA for doing my finish paint, my painting. And then I've got this Real Deal DeVilbus for doing clears if I have to. But as far as putting the primers on, I've got this DeVilbus clone. Everybody chuckles at it. They call it a DeWabus. I got it off of some import place. It's actually not a bad gun. It's just not going to last because it's not the same quality as a real DeVilbus like it's copied off of. But it's pretty good for laying down primers and stuff. Cleans up good, works well for the amount that I'm ever going to use it. I am probably never going to wear it out. So anyways, we're going to mix up some primer here in the next few minutes after I clean up that mess, get the fans going, and put the last coat of epoxy primer on the top of the Roadster body. Here it is. We're finally done. We've got the International Roadster epoxy primed. Been talking about it for 4 episodes, I think, or so, that we've got to do it, got to do it, got to do it. It's finally done. There's all kinds of things you've got to do to get there, unfortunately, just from cleaning and preparation and timing and just moving stuff out of the way in order to do it. So everything went well. I'm quite happy with it. We got 2 coats of epoxy primer on the bottom and on the top and everywhere as I could reach inside, which is more than an original would have. Inside of an original, if I'm not mistaken, there was no coating on the inside. But what we wanted to do basically is save the body. This body might sit for a little while we go to work on the 58 Ford cab. We're going to see how that goes. We did not do the deck lid. So I was in discussions with the owner. What he would actually like to do is get another new deck lid, an outer deck lid, get it louvered, and then we'll put it together. So we can take care of that later. We know that the body is square, that it's going to fit because we tried the camera lady's deck lid in it, so we're good to go on that. So we'll address the deck lid at some future episode of hopefully getting it louvered, putting it back together and fitting it in the body. While I had the opportunity, I also epoxy primed the original 32 Roadster dash. Now the owner doesn't want to use this dash in this body, he wants a flat one. So again, to prevent this from getting any more rust onto it, we put an epoxy primer on it because we'd sandblast it. The cowl vent is also done. We did not get the hole here that covers the Model A spring done, but again, we'll do that in the future at some point in time. But the focus really was just to get the body cleaned, get the epoxy primer on it, and then basically then it can sit for just a little while we go towards other things. I mean, we also had to get this out of the way and out of the garage so that we could do the same thing to the camera lady's 32 Roadster body. That one's going to be a little more difficult because it's got the firewall and the floor into it. I think what I'm going to have to do is put some sort of a wheel or something on the front of the firewall and then tip it up on the wheels. I mean, with this Roadster body, I was able actually to get into the cowl and actually spray on the inside, so that was good. What I'm also going to do is, I really like these PPS cups for spraying. We'll put a link in the video to where to buy it on Amazon. Same thing with the Eastwood, I don't know, they call it a surface contour, something or other. It's basically for cleaning up panels. And I really like my DeWalt mini grinder. We don't get paid anything for this, but I mean, if you like them, we're going to give you a link of where we bought them from, and hopefully you will find the same thing. If you use them already, give me your feedback. Tell me what you think too. Anyways, that's it for this video. Please like, share, tag, and subscribe. Come see us next week, and we're going to be working on the other 2 Roadsters. Everybody take care.